All right, welcome to lesson 3. The lesson numbers follow the lesson numbers in the book. This is week 2. So before we get started, let's go through a few things in the book. We're starting at page 63, and this is going to center around basic part modeling. After this lesson, you're going to be able to complete what you see on the screen. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through these as we create this next part. So here's the basic model that we're going to create. It's a little bit more complex than what we made previously. And so we're going to be extruding, we're going to be adding on shapes to bases that we already created. We're going to be creating holes, some fillets. And so we're starting to approach maybe something that looks a little bit more like a real world part. All right, so looking at the stages in the process when we start either a sketch or we're thinking of a model, these are a list of things that we kind of either go through. We don't necessarily have a checklist, but they're things that we think about. And again, it's coming back to the design intent in the first feature. Where do we want to start? Basically, we want to start with a simple shape or feature that we can build off of. That's usually the best way to go. Talk a little bit about bosses, some of the fillets, drawings, dimension changes as we have in the past. All right, with terminology. So features, we talked a little bit about a feature in that first part that we made, but a feature is basically what we make from a sketch. So all cuts, bosses, planes, sketches. The sketch is not really the feature, but it's what we make from the sketches. You can go through some of the terminology here, but the planes, so extrusions are going to how we make these features, and we shape the solid. Sketches we already talked about, which is our 2D profile that we're going to extrude or revolve. So bosses are used to add material to the model. We usually start with a base or a boss, and then we add to that. A cut is used to remove material, so pretty kind of fundamental terminology here. And then once we get to fillets and chamfers, or sometimes called a radius, or a fillet and radius is somewhat interchangeable. But once we get to fillets and chamfers, we typically will put them on the solid or the feature, not the sketch. It's going to be a lot easier, and then it also affects the way the whole model can behave. So normally we're going to leave those towards the end, and we'll put them on the solid. And again, back to design intent. So let's take a look just at a couple of these sample parts, and what they've done is they've given you a sample best profile or first feature used to create the rest of the part, and you can kind of get an idea of how you should start some of these parts. And you can see on the left, they're fairly a little bit more complex parts, but they don't start out that way, and so you can see how they start out and then what has been done, either added or subtracted from that initial feature to end up with the final part that we want or that we intend. Once we're ready to begin a sketch or a model, then we need to choose the sketch plane. I kind of mentioned this in some of the first lessons, and how I generally create parts, and because I'm in manufacturing, I typically will create a part how I envision it sitting in a mill or a lathe, and usually I will use the front plane just because of how the part orients in there, and it lines up with the X, Y, and Z axis. But if we look here, it kind of makes it gives more sense to how these are laid out, and they use the inside a box kind of analogy, and you can see where the front, right, and the top plane all meet. to create that origin. So depending on what you're doing and how you want to see that part projected into a drawing, that is how you're going to orient your model. Like I said, I typically will start with the front plane unless it's something special that I'm doing, but it's something that you have to think about in respect to what you're doing with that particular drawing or model. So taking a look what they've done here in the book, they've given you an example, and this is on page 68, of taking a part and basically aligning the bottom of the part, or that longest flat surface, with different planes to show you how it would look on the screen or in the drawings. And if you've taken a blueprint reading class, this might make a little bit more sense in how we project those drawings from an isometric view. So in that top example, they've got that flat surface resting on the top plane, and then you can see what the views would be from those other planes. In the second example, they've got that same surface now flipped 90 degrees, so it's touching the front plane. And again, we can rotate in SolidWorks. We already looked at, you can rotate the part on the screen any way you want to see it. So that's not really what we're talking about, but it's how, once we create an engineered drawing, is how that's going to be seen in the different views. And it might determine the way we also dimension it in the end. And so here you can see how it looks on the drawing in the front and the top and the right views. All right, taking a look at what we're going to create in this lesson, you can see the part here from the front, here from the back. Standard views with an isometric, and then we've got a top, a front, and a right side view. The main bosses, you can see, is a large rectangle, and then this other shape, and we're going to merge those together. So they're saying the best profile is going to be this large rectangle, and that's how we're going to start. This is showing them and how that box that we just talked about, putting that part in the box. And so what we're going to use is the top plane in this exercise. And then once we are done creating the solid shape, we will go ahead and we'll put on the radii and we will create the holes. So that concludes this lesson. With the next video, we will start creating the part.